The first time my family called me selfish, I almost believed them. The second time, I stayed quiet. But the third time, I opened a folder my father had left behind and placed one piece of paper on the table. That piece of paper changed everything. It proved the house they were planning to refinance was not Karen's house. It was mine too, but I didn't know that yet. That Friday evening, I was standing in my mother's kitchen with a pie in my hands, smiling like an idiot. I had driven 40 minutes to get there. I had made the pie that morning because Mom always said it tasted better when I made it. I remember setting it on the counter and asking, "Where is everyone?" My mother looked at me for half a second too long. Then she looked toward my sister Karen. Karen was sitting at the dining table, dressed in a blue sweater and gold earrings. She wasn't smiling anymore. That was when I knew something was wrong. "What?" I asked. Karen crossed her arms. "You weren't supposed to come tonight." I thought she was joking. I actually laughed. "Come on, Karen. Mom said dinner was tonight." Nobody answered. I looked around the room. My mother, Karen, her husband, Rick, 2 cousins, an uncle, all of them sitting there like they had been waiting for someone. Just not me. My mother finally sighed. "Ellie, honey, I hated those words." "What's going on?" Karen looked down at her phone. Then she said it. "We had dinner last night." I stared at her. "What?" "The family dinner." She said it like I was a child who had forgotten something simple. "It was last night." I felt the pie plate grow heavy in my hands. "But Mom told me Friday." My mother didn't correct Karen. She just looked at me with those soft, tired eyes she always used when she wanted me to feel guilty. Karen leaned back in her chair. "You were busy anyway." I wasn't. "Well, you always are. I asked you twice this week." "I know." There was something cold in the way she said it. I looked at my mother. "You knew." She reached for her coffee. "Yes. Why didn't anyone tell me?" Nobody spoke. Then Karen gave a little shrug. "Because every time you're around, you make everything about money." That one hurt. Not because it was true. Because I had spent years making sure money was never a problem for any of them. I paid Mom's property taxes when she got behind. I helped Karen when her roof leaked. I paid for repairs at the lake house. I had even covered one of Rick's truck payments when his business was slow. I never kept a list. At least, I thought I didn't. But standing there with that pie in my hands, I suddenly remembered every single one. My mother reached for my arm. "Don't make this into something bigger than it is." I pulled my hand back gently. "I'm not." Karen laughed. "You always do this." "Do what?" "Act like you're the only person who cares about this family." I looked at her, then at my mother, then at the people sitting around that table. And I understood something. They had not forgotten me. They had chosen not to invite me. That was different. I set the pie on the counter. "I hope you all enjoyed dinner." My mother stood. "Ellie, wait." I turned toward the door. "It's not about the dinner." Karen called after me. "Then what is it about?" I looked back at her. For the first time in my life, I didn't explain myself. I simply said, "I'm not sure yet." Then I walked out. The drive home was quiet. No music. No phone calls. Just the sound of my tires against the road. When I got home, I took off my coat and placed my keys on the little wooden tray by the door. Then I stood there in my kitchen for a long time. I kept hearing Karen's voice. "You make everything about money." Maybe she was right about one thing. I had spent too much of my life pretending money didn't matter. Not because I loved money. Because I loved them. There is a difference. I made tea and sat at the kitchen table. That's when I noticed the old cabinet beside the refrigerator. My father's cabinet. After he died, Mom had given me a few boxes of his papers. Tax records. Insurance documents. Old receipts. Things nobody else wanted. One folder had always stayed with me. I had never opened it. It was marked in my father's handwriting. Lake House. I stood up. I opened the cabinet. The folder was still there. Dusty. Bent at one corner. I pulled it out and placed it on the table. My father had died 7 years earlier. Before he died, he had told me something I never understood. "Ellie, keep these papers safe." I had asked him why. He only smiled. Someday, you'll need them. At the time, I thought he was talking about taxes. Now I wasn't so sure. I opened the folder. The first few pages were old receipts, then insurance papers, then a closing statement, and finally, a document with 3 names printed across the top. I read the first name, my mother's, then Karen's, then mine. I stopped breathing for a second. Under our names were 2 words, joint owners. I read them again. My sister had spent years calling it her house. My mother had called it Karen's house. Rick had talked about refinancing their property. And somehow, I had forgotten the one thing my father had never forgotten. My name was on the deed. I reached for my phone. Then I stopped. I didn't call Karen. I didn't call Mom. I didn't call anyone. Because suddenly, I had a feeling that the dinner I had been excluded from wasn't really about dinner at all. And if my father had been right about those papers, my family was about to discover that the quiet daughter they had called selfish was not nearly as powerless as they thought. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. I had barely slept. That old deed had been sitting on my kitchen table all night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those 3 names. Mom, Karen, me, joint owners. I made coffee and sat down with the folder again. I read every page. The lake house had been purchased by my father 22 years earlier. After his death, Marilyn and Karen began using it as their private family getaway. I never fought them for it. I paid property taxes during difficult years. I paid for repairs. I even helped Karen and Rick renovate the kitchen. Over time, everyone began calling it Karen's lake house. I never corrected them. Then I remembered something important. My father had insisted that 3 names appear on the deed. His wife, Marilyn. His daughter, Karen. And me. I checked the county records. The deed was still valid. My name was still there. Then I found something more disturbing. A recent letter from a mortgage company addressed to Karen and Rick. It mentioned a refinance application. The property was being used as collateral. I realized they may already be planning something. My phone rang. It was Mom. I stared at the screen for several seconds before answering. Hello. Ellie, honey. Her voice sounded soft. Too soft. I've been thinking about last night. So have I. There was a pause. I don't want you upset. I am upset. I know. Another pause. Then she said something that made my stomach tighten. We need to talk about the lake house. I looked at the folder. I thought that was Karen's house. Mom went quiet. Only for a second. But I heard it. That tiny pause people make when they realize they have said too much. Well, you know what I mean. No, Mom. I kept my voice calm. I don't. She sighed. Karen and Rick are having a hard time. I closed my eyes. Of course they were. How bad? They have some bills. What kind of bills? I don't know all the details. That wasn't true. Mom always knew the details. She knew everyone's business. She knew what Karen spent at the grocery store. She knew when Rick's truck needed repairs. She knew everything. Except when it came to me. I think they need to borrow against the lake house, she finally said. I didn't answer. Ellie? I heard you. I looked at the deed again. You're sure about that? What do you mean? I'll call you later, Mom. I ended the call. My hands were shaking. Not from anger. From something worse. Disappointment. I had spent years believing my family saw me as the dependable one. Now I was starting to wonder if they saw me as something else. A wallet. A backup plan. Someone who could always be counted on. I went back through the folder. Then I found an old letter from my father. It wasn't addressed to anyone. Just one sentence was written across the page. Ellie, never sign away something simply because someone makes you feel guilty. I read it 3 times. Then I remembered something Karen had said 2 weeks earlier. She had called me and asked, "Do you still have Dad's old property papers?" At the time, I had laughed. I told her I probably did. She had quickly changed the subject. Now I knew why she had asked. My phone rang again. Karen. I almost didn't answer. But I did. Hi. Hey, she said brightly. Her voice sounded completely different from the night before. I wanted to apologize. For what? For how things went. I said nothing. She continued. Mom is upset. I'm upset. Everyone is stressed. Why? Because we have something important to discuss. The lake house. She went silent. Then she laughed. You talked to Mom. Yes. Okay, good. She sounded relieved. Then you understand. I understand that you want to borrow money against a property. Not borrow money. She paused. Refinance. And whose name is on the property? Another pause. Karen's voice became colder. Ellie, don't do this. Do what? Turn everything into a legal argument. I looked at the deed. I haven't argued about anything. You know what Dad wanted. No, I said it quietly. I know what Dad wrote. Karen didn't answer. Then she said, can you come over tomorrow? Why? Mom wants us all together. For what? To sign some papers. My heart started beating faster. What papers? Nothing complicated. I almost laughed. Nothing complicated. That was exactly the kind of sentence people used when they wanted you to sign something without reading it. I'll think about it. Karen's voice sharpened. You're really going to make this difficult? I looked at my father's note. Then I looked at my name on the deed. No, I said. I think I'm finally going to make it simple. She hung up. I sat there in silence. Then I noticed something I had missed the night before. Behind the deed was a white envelope. My father's handwriting was on the front. For Ellie. Open when they ask you to give it away. My heart stopped. I slowly reached for the envelope. And before I opened it, I knew one thing. My father had expected this day to come. And whatever was inside that envelope, he had left it there for me. The envelope felt heavier than it should have. I held it between both hands and stared at my father's handwriting. For Ellie. Open when they ask you to give it away. My father had written those words years ago. How could he have known? I opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper. There was no legal language. No complicated instructions. Just my father's handwriting. Ellie, if you're reading this, someone has finally asked you to give up your share of the lake house. Please don't do it because you feel sorry for them. And don't do it because they make you feel guilty. You have spent your whole life carrying things other people refuse to carry. This house is different. It is one thing I want you to keep. Not because of the money. Because I want you to have a place where nobody can tell you that you don't belong. Love, Dad. I couldn't read the last line for a moment. My eyes filled with tears. I had forgotten how much I missed him. My father was the only person in my family who never called me selfish. He used to say I was too willing to give. I always thought he was joking. Now I wasn't so sure. I folded the letter and placed it back inside the envelope. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Karen. Tomorrow. 6 p.m. Mom's house. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be. I stared at the message. Then another one came. We just need your signature. My stomach tightened. Just your signature. Those 4 words told me more than Karen probably intended. I spent the rest of the afternoon checking every document I had. The original deed. The tax records. The insurance papers. The repair bills. Everything pointed to the same thing. My name was there. I was a legal owner. But I still didn't know what Karen and Rick were planning. So I called the county office. I asked for a copy of the current property record. The woman on the phone was polite. She asked for the property address. I gave it to her. Then she said something that made my heart beat faster. There was a recent inquiry. About the property? Yes. Who made it? She couldn't give me personal information over the phone. But she could tell me that someone had requested records connected to a possible loan. A loan. I thanked her and hung up. Now I knew. This wasn't just about transferring my name. They were planning to borrow against the house. And if something went wrong, my name would still be connected to that property. I sat at my kitchen table until the sun went down. Then I drove to Mom's house. There were more cars outside than I expected. Karen's SUV. Rick's truck. My uncle's sedan. Even my cousin Melissa was there. I walked inside. Everyone stopped talking. That silence told me everything. They had been discussing me. Karen smiled. Ellie, come in. I took off my coat. What's this about? Mom walked toward me. Let's sit down first. I followed them into the dining room. There was a folder sitting in the middle of the table. A thick one. Karen placed her hand on it. This is the refinance paperwork. I looked at the folder. Where's my copy? Karen frowned. You'll get one after we explain everything. No, I looked at her. I want to see it first. Rick leaned back in his chair. Come on, Ellie. His voice had that annoyed tone I knew too well. It's not a big deal. I looked at him. If it's not a big deal, why are there so many people here? Nobody answered. My mother finally spoke. Because we're family. I almost smiled. That word had been used against me my entire life. Family. Whenever they needed money. Family. Whenever they needed a favor. Family. Whenever I was expected to stay quiet. Karen opened the folder. We need to refinance the lake house. I know. And your signature is needed. I know. She looked surprised. Then you understand. I understand that you want me to sign something. Karen sighed. Ellie, this could save us. There it was. Not the house. Not family. Not even me. Us. I looked around the table. Who is us? Karen's face changed. Rick looked away. Mom lowered her eyes. And suddenly I knew. This loan wasn't just for repairs. It wasn't for the house. It wasn't even for Mom. It was for Karen and Rick. Their debts. Their problems. Their choices. And they had decided that my share of the house would be the solution. Karen pushed the first page toward me. Just sign here. I didn't touch the pen. Instead, I looked at the bottom of the page. Then I looked at Karen. What happens if you don't pay? Rick answered before she could. We will. That wasn't my question. He became quiet. I looked at Mom. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Then I looked back at the folder. For the first time, I saw the truth clearly. They hadn't invited me to dinner because they wanted me there. They had excluded me because they needed something from me. And now they were sitting around a table waiting for me to give it to them. I slowly pushed the paper back. I need to read everything first. Karen's smile disappeared. Why? Because my name is on it. She leaned forward. You trust us, don't you? I remembered my father's letter. I remembered every bill I had paid. Every favor. Every time I had been told I was selfish for asking questions. I looked at Karen. I used to. The room went silent. Then Karen said the words that would stay with me for years. You've always been selfish, Ellie. I picked up my purse. Nobody moved. I walked toward the door. And just before I stepped outside, I turned around. You may want to check the deed before you call me selfish again. Karen stared at me. Rick stood up. What does that mean? I smiled for the first time that evening. It means you should read the papers your father left behind. Then I walked out. I didn't tell them everything. Not yet. Because I still had one question. If they knew I was a co-owner, why had they already prepared the refinance without me? And what else had they signed? The next morning, I found an envelope waiting on my doorstep. There was no return address. No stamp. Just my name. Ellie. I picked it up and looked around the street. Nothing. I carried it inside and placed it on the kitchen counter. For a few minutes, I didn't open it. After everything that had happened, I had learned one thing. Nothing in my family was ever just paperwork. Finally, I tore it open. Inside was a copy of the refinance application. My name was nowhere on the first page. But on the second page, I saw something that made my hands go cold. The property was listed as collateral. The estimated value was $420,000, and the requested loan was $280,000. I read the number again. $280,000. For a house they kept calling Karen's. I turned the page. There were names listed as borrowers. Karen Hayes. Rick Hayes. Then, under property ownership, there were 3 names. Marilyn Hayes. Karen Hayes. Eleanor Hayes. My name. They knew. They had known all along. I sat down. For several minutes, I couldn't move. Then I noticed the date. The application had been started almost 3 weeks earlier. 3 weeks. That was before Karen had called me asking about Dad's papers. Before the family dinner. Before they told me I was selfish. Before they asked for my signature. They had been planning this while smiling at me. I picked up my phone and took pictures of every page. Then I called a local attorney. I didn't know him personally. A friend had given me his name years earlier. When he answered, I explained the situation. He listened. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, he asked one question. Have you signed anything? No. Have you agreed verbally to transfer your ownership? No. Good. His voice was calm. That helped me breathe again. He told me to bring every document I had. The original deed. The refinance application. My father's letter. The tax records. Everything. I put it all into a folder. Then my phone rang. Karen. I let it ring. She called again. Then again. Finally, I answered. Hello. What did you do? Her voice was sharp. I don't know what you're talking about. You know exactly what I'm talking about. I received a copy of the refinance application. Silence. Then she said, Who gave you that? I don't know. Ellie, this is a family matter. No, I looked at the folder in front of me. It became a legal matter when you used my property as collateral. Karen took a breath. We were going to tell you. When? Today. You already started the application 3 weeks ago. She didn't answer. That silence told me enough. Then she said something I never expected. Dad wanted Karen to have that house. I closed my eyes. Then why is my name on the deed? He made a mistake. My father didn't make mistakes like that. He was sick. He was careful. He was old. I felt something inside me change. Karen was no longer asking. She was trying to rewrite the past. I said, Don't contact me about the property again until you've spoken with my attorney. She laughed. You're serious? Yes. You'd really do this to your own sister? I looked at my father's letter. Then I said, I didn't do anything to you. You're stopping us from saving our family. No, I spoke slowly. You're asking me to risk my future to fix your past. She went quiet. Then she whispered, You're selfish. I didn't argue. I simply ended the call. For the first time, that word didn't hurt. It sounded almost empty. Later that afternoon, I met with the attorney. He spread the documents across his desk. He read the deed first. Then the refinance application. Then the tax records. He looked at me. Your ownership is clear. I let out a breath. What about the loan? They cannot complete it without your consent. So they can't use the house? Not legally, no. I nodded. Then he pointed to the refinance application. This is more concerning. Why? He tapped a paragraph near the bottom. They've represented that all owners are cooperating with the transaction. I stared at the page. But I never agreed. I know. Then why would they say that? He looked at me. Because they expected you to sign later. I felt sick. They weren't waiting for my permission. They were counting on my guilt. They thought that once everyone sat around the table, cried enough, and called me selfish enough times, I would eventually pick up the pen. My attorney closed the folder. You need to decide what you want. What are my choices? You can sell your share. You can keep your share. Or you can negotiate a buyout. I thought about the lake house. The porch where my father used to sit. The old wooden dock. The little room upstairs where I had slept as a child. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to punish Karen. I just wanted the truth. I want a fair solution, I said. He nodded. Then let them make the next move. That evening, I went back to my mother's house. I wasn't planning to argue. I wasn't planning to reveal everything. I simply wanted to see their faces. When I walked inside, Karen was there. Rick was standing near the kitchen. Mom was sitting at the table. And on the table was another document. Karen looked at me. We need you to sign this tonight. I looked at the paper. Then I looked at her. No, she stood. You don't even know what it is. I know enough. Mom began to cry. Rick slammed his hand against the table. You're going to ruin us. I didn't move. Then Karen stepped closer. Her voice became quiet. Almost gentle. You really think you have power because your name is on one old deed? I looked at her. No, I reached into my purse. I think I have power because I finally decided to read it. I placed a certified copy of the deed on the table. Karen picked it up. Her eyes moved across the page, then stopped. Her face went pale. Rick leaned over her shoulder. Mom stood slowly. Nobody spoke. Because there it was. My father's signature. The county seal. And my name. Right beside theirs. For the first time, nobody called at Karen's house. And I knew the next few minutes were going to change our family forever. The room went completely silent. Karen was still holding the deed. Her eyes moved from the top of the page to the bottom. Then she looked at me. You knew. I shook my head. Not until yesterday. Rick grabbed the paper from her hand. He read it quickly. Then slower. His face changed. That can't be right. It is. No, he looked at Mom. Did you know about this? Mom didn't answer. That was the answer. Rick turned back to me. You've known for years? No, but your name is right there. My father put it there. Karen stared at the deed again. Then she whispered, he promised me this house. I felt a sadness I couldn't explain. Maybe he promised you memories. She looked at me. What does that mean? It means he never promised you ownership. Karen's face hardened. You're really going to take this from me? I looked around the room. The house was quiet. My mother was crying. Rick was angry. Karen looked like I had betrayed her. But I had to remind myself of something. I wasn't taking anything. I was refusing to give away something that was already legally mine. I didn't take your house, I said. You've been using it for years. You've been calling it yours. But the deed says otherwise. Rick pushed the paper toward me. Then sell us your share. I looked at him. Why? So we can refinance. You mean so you can borrow against it? He said nothing. Karen stepped forward. We need the money. How much? She hesitated. 280,000. I stared at her. That much? Rick finally spoke. We have debts. What kind? He looked away. I didn't need the answer. I already knew. But I asked anyway. How much do you owe? Karen's eyes filled with tears. It's not your business. I nodded. Exactly. That word seemed to hit harder than I expected. My mother wiped her face. Ellie, please. I turned toward her. Mom, what did Dad tell you about the deed? She looked down. Your father said it was for all three of us. I waited. She finally looked at me. He said you should keep your share. My chest tightened. Then why did you let everyone call it Karen's? Mom started crying again. I didn't think it would matter. I almost laughed. Until today. She didn't answer. Karen walked toward me. Her voice was softer now. You don't understand. Then explain it. We're going to lose everything. What does that mean? The business is gone. I looked at Rick. He nodded slowly. We made some bad decisions. How bad? Karen whispered. Bad enough that the bank is after us. Suddenly, the whole picture became clear. The dinner. The secret calls. The paperwork. The pressure. They hadn't been planning to improve the lake house. They were trying to save themselves. And they had decided my ownership was the easiest way to do it. I sat down. For the first time that night, I felt tired. Not angry. Just tired. I remembered every Christmas. Every birthday. Every time Karen had called me when something went wrong. And I remembered how quickly they had all agreed that I was selfish. I looked at my mother. I need you to answer one question. She nodded. Did you know they were planning to use the house to pay their debts? She looked at Karen. Karen looked away. That was enough. I stood. I won't sign anything tonight. Rick shook his head. You're making a huge mistake. No, I picked up my purse. I'm making the first decision in years that doesn't begin with asking what everyone else needs. Karen's face twisted. So that's it? No, I looked at the deed. This isn't about revenge. Then what is it about? Choice. Nobody spoke. I walked toward the door. Then Karen called after me. Ellie. I stopped. She was crying now. I really thought you loved me. I turned around. I do. She looked surprised. But loving you doesn't mean I have to ruin myself for you. I left. Outside, the evening air was cold. I sat in my car for several minutes before starting the engine. My hands were trembling. I wanted to cry. I wanted to turn around. I wanted to go back inside and fix everything like I always had. But then I remembered my father's letter. Don't give it away because they make you feel guilty. So I drove home. The next morning, my attorney called. I received something from the lender. What? They've put the refinance on hold. I closed my eyes. That was fast. There is something else. What? They are claiming you had agreed to cooperate. My heart sank. I never agreed. I know. Then why would they say that? He paused. Because someone told them you would. Then he sent me a copy of an email. I opened it. The sender was Karen. The message was short. Ellie has agreed to sign. She just needs a little more time. I stared at those words. They had lied. Not just to me. To the lender. About my property. About my consent. About everything. And suddenly, I knew this was bigger than a family argument. This was no longer about whether I would sign. It was about what they had already done before I ever knew there was a problem. My attorney called again. Ellie, I think you need to prepare yourself. For what? He was quiet for a moment. Your family may not be planning to ask you anymore. I felt a chill run through me. What are they planning to do? He answered slowly. They may be preparing to force the sale. The next morning, my attorney called before I had finished my coffee. His voice was calm. But something in the way he said my name made me sit down. Ellie, I need you to listen carefully. I am. The lender has stopped the refinance. I let out a breath. Good. Yes. But there is a problem. I waited. They're claiming that your sister relied on your agreement. I frowned. I never agreed to anything. I know. Then what are they saying? They say you told Karen you would cooperate. I looked at the copy of the email on my table. The lie was right there in black and white. I felt angry. But beneath the anger was something colder. Fear. Not fear of losing the house. Fear of discovering how far my family had gone. My attorney continued. They may try to force a sale. Can they? They can ask a court. But can they win? That depends on the facts. I looked toward the old folder sitting beside me. What should I do? Do not sign anything. I won't. And don't have private conversations about the property. Why? Because everything needs to be documented now. I nodded. Even though he couldn't see me. After we hung up, I sat quietly. For years, I had trusted my family without needing proof. Now I was being told to document every word. That was a painful thing to accept. Around noon, Karen came to my house. I saw her car pull into the driveway. She walked to my front door and knocked. I didn't open it. She knocked again. Ellie, please. I stood behind the door. What do you want? I need to talk to you. We already talked. No, we didn't. You told me I was selfish. I was upset. You lied to the lender. Silence. Then she said, I didn't mean for it to go that far. I opened the door. She stood there with red eyes. She looked tired. Not angry. Just tired. For a second, I saw my little sister again. The girl who used to sleep in my room during thunderstorms. The girl I had carried when she broke her ankle. The girl whose college books I had paid for when Dad was sick. Then I remembered the email. I need you to tell me the truth. She looked down. I made a mistake. What kind? I told them you were going to sign. Why? Because I thought you would. Why would you think that? She started crying. Because you always do. Those words hurt more than anything else she had said. Not because they were cruel. Because they were true. I had trained my family to expect my help. Every time I said yes, they expected another yes. Every time I fixed something, they stopped learning how to fix it themselves. Karen wiped her face. We're drowning. I know. Rick lost the business. I know. The bank wants the money. I know. We need the house. I shook my head. No, she looked at me. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. No, Ellie. She stepped closer. You don't have children. I froze. She continued. You don't know what it's like to watch your family fall apart. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I said, maybe I don't have children, but I have spent my whole life being treated like everyone's mother. She looked away. Neither of us spoke. Finally, she whispered, Dad would be ashamed of you. That sentence broke something inside me. Not because I believed it. Because she knew exactly where to hurt me. I stepped back. Leave. Ellie, please leave. She walked away. I closed the door. Then I sat on the floor and cried. I cried for my father. For my mother. For Karen. For the family I thought I had. And when the tears finally stopped, I made a decision. I was not going to destroy them. But I was not going to save them either. That evening, I called my attorney. I want to make an offer. What kind? A fair one. I explained that I would sell my share of the lake house at its fair market value. No discount. No threats. No revenge. Just a clean separation. He agreed to prepare the proposal. The next morning, I sent it. Karen called within 20 minutes. You're selling your share? Yes. But that means we have to find the money. Yes. We don't have it. I know. You're forcing us to sell. I closed my eyes. No, you are. No, Karen. I spoke slowly. Your debts are forcing you to make a choice. She was quiet. Then she said, You're really going through with this? Yes. She hung up. I thought that was the end. It wasn't. 3 days later, my attorney called again. His voice was different this time. Ellie, we found something. What? A transfer request. My stomach dropped. Transfer of what? Your ownership interest. I never signed one. I know. Then who did? He didn't answer immediately. Finally, he said, That's what we're trying to find out. I looked toward the folder. My father's deed. His letter. All those old papers. And suddenly, I understood why they had been so confident. They hadn't simply planned to pressure me into signing. Someone had already tried to move my name off the property. Without my permission. Without my signature. And if my attorney was right, we were no longer dealing with a family argument. We were dealing with something much more serious. The next morning, I was sitting at my kitchen table when my attorney called. Ellie, we found something. I sat up. What? The transfer request. My heart started pounding. You said someone filed a request to transfer my ownership. That's right. Who? We don't know yet. I stared at the window. How can someone transfer my property without my signature? They can't legally complete it. But they tried. Yes. That answer frightened me more than anything else. Someone had taken a step they knew they weren't supposed to take. My attorney told me to come to his office. I arrived 20 minutes later. He had several papers spread across his desk. One was the original deed. Another was the refinance application. Then there was the transfer request. I looked at it. My name was printed correctly. The property address was correct. But the signature line was blank. There's no signature, I said. Correct. So how did this get filed? We're checking. I looked at him. Do you think Karen did it? I can't tell you that. But you have a guess. He gave me a careful look. My job is to deal with facts. I nodded. Then he handed me another document. This came with the filing. I read it. It was a statement claiming that all owners had agreed to cooperate with the transfer. I felt sick. They lied again. Yes. I looked at the date. It had been filed only 2 days after the family dinner I wasn't invited to. That was no coincidence. They had already been planning everything before they ever sat me down. My attorney leaned back. Ellie, I want you to understand something. I looked at him. This is no longer a simple family dispute. I know. If someone knowingly filed false information, that's serious. I nodded. Then I asked the question that had been sitting in my mind. What happens now? We send a formal notice. To Karen. To everyone involved. And the lender? Yes. I took a deep breath. For years, I had avoided conflict. Now I was sitting in a lawyer's office discussing legal notices against my own family. It felt unreal. When I got home, I found 3 missed calls from Mom. Then a voicemail. Her voice was shaky. Ellie, please call me. I almost ignored it. But I called back. She answered immediately. Thank God. What happened? Karen told me you're trying to take the lake house. I closed my eyes. Mom, that's not what I'm doing. She says you want to sell it. I want to sell my share. That will force everyone out. No, I tried to stay calm. The house can't be used to pay their debts without my consent. Mom became quiet. Then she whispered, I didn't know it was this bad. What didn't you know? Karen and Rick. What about them? They're in much more debt than I thought. I sat down. How much? I don't know. Mom. She sighed. Over $300,000. I felt a chill. The refinance amount was $280,000. Now it made sense. They weren't trying to borrow money for a new project. They were trying to escape a hole they had already fallen into. And they wanted my name on the solution. I asked, did Dad know about this? No, then why did he put my name on the deed? Mom started crying. He knew Karen. I froze. What does that mean? He knew she was impulsive. I nodded slowly. Mom continued. He told me once that you were the one person he trusted to protect the property. I looked toward the folder on my table. My father's words suddenly felt different. He hadn't put my name there because he loved one daughter more. He had put it there because he knew I would protect something that mattered. Mom said, Ellie, I made a mistake. What mistake? I let everyone believe the house belonged to Karen. I swallowed. Why? Because it was easier. Those two words stayed with me. Because it was easier. That was the reason people had ignored the truth for years. It was easier to let me pay. Easier to let Karen believe the house was hers. Easier to call me selfish when I finally said no. I told Mom I needed some time. After the call, I went through every old file again. Then I found something I had never noticed. A small handwritten note attached to the original deed. It was dated the same year my father bought the house. I read it once. Then again. It said, no sale, transfer, or loan without Eleanor's written consent. My hands went cold. I called my attorney immediately. He told me to bring the note. When he read it, he became very quiet. Ellie. What? This is important. How important? He looked at me. Very. He explained that the note needed to be reviewed properly with the recorded documents. But if it was part of the original property records, it could make the family's plan even harder. I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Relief. Not because I wanted to hurt anyone. Because for the first time, I knew I wasn't crazy. I had not misunderstood my father. I had not imagined my ownership. And I had not stolen anything from Karen. The truth had been there all along. That evening, Karen called. I answered. She didn't yell. She didn't insult me. Instead, she said, can we meet? Why? Just you and me. I hesitated. Where? The lake house. I looked at the old photograph hanging on my wall. The lake house. The place my father had loved. The place that had now become the center of our family's fight. I agreed. But before I hung up, Karen said something strange. Bring the original deed. I froze. Why? I need to show you something. What? She paused. Then she whispered, something Dad left behind. The call ended. I stared at my phone. For the first time, I wondered if Karen had a document I had never seen. Something that could change everything. And if she did, why had she waited until now to show me? The lake house looked exactly the way I remembered it. The same white porch. The same old wooden chairs. The same maple tree my father had planted when I was 12. I parked in the driveway and sat in my car for a minute. Karen was already there. She stood on the porch with her arms crossed. When I got out, she looked at the folder in my hand. You brought it. Yes. The original? Yes. She nodded. Come inside. I followed her into the house. It felt strange being there. For years, everyone had called it Karen's place. But that evening, I kept thinking about my father's name. His hands had built part of this house. His memories were in every room. Karen led me into the living room. There was an old wooden box on the coffee table. I had never seen it before. She pointed at it. Dad left this. I looked at her. When? After he died. Then why didn't you tell me? She looked away. Because I didn't think it mattered. I almost laughed. That seems to be everyone's favorite sentence. She didn't smile. Instead, she opened the box. Inside were old photographs, letters, a watch, and another envelope. My name was written on it. I looked at Karen. What is that? I don't know. You opened it? No, why not? She swallowed. Because Dad told me not to. I stared at her. What exactly did he say? She looked down. He said if there was ever a fight over the house, I had to give this to you. My heart began to beat faster. Why didn't you give it to me before? She didn't answer. I stepped closer. Karen. She finally looked at me. Because I was afraid. Afraid of what? That you would take the house. I shook my head. I never wanted the house. But you could have. Yes. I looked at the envelope. But I never did. She opened her mouth. Then closed it. I picked up the envelope. My fingers were shaking. I opened it. Inside was another letter from my father. This one was longer. Ellie, if this letter is in your hands, then something has gone wrong. I hope it never does. But if it does, remember this. The lake house belongs to all of you according to the deed. I put your name there for a reason. You are the one who understands that family is not about who shouts the loudest. It is about who protects what matters. Do not let anyone pressure you into giving up your share. And do not use your share to punish anyone. Your mother may need help someday. Karen may make mistakes. But helping someone and surrendering your future are not the same thing. There is a difference. Learn it. Love, Dad. I lowered the letter. My eyes were wet. Karen was crying too. He knew, she whispered. I nodded. He knew everything. She sat down. I thought he wanted me to have the house. He wanted you to have a home. That sounds different. It is. She looked at the floor. I was wrong. I didn't answer. She continued. I thought you were trying to take something from me. I wasn't. I know. Her voice cracked. I know now. For the first time in months, we sat together without fighting. Then Karen reached into the box again. There is one more thing. She pulled out a small envelope. This one wasn't addressed to me. It had her name on it. She handed it to me. Read it. I looked at her. It's yours. I know. She pushed it toward me. I want you to read it. I opened it. It was a letter from Dad to Karen. There were only a few paragraphs. He told her that he loved her. But he also warned her about debt. About rushing. About depending on other people to solve problems she created. And near the end, he wrote, Your sister may be quieter than you, but never mistake quiet for weakness. I looked up. Karen wiped her eyes. He knew me too. Yes. She laughed sadly. He knew all of us. I sat beside her. For a moment, I wanted to forgive everything. Then I remembered the refinance application. The false statement. The transfer request. I couldn't pretend those things had never happened. Karen. She looked at me. I want to help you. Her eyes filled with hope. But I can't help you by signing away my ownership. She nodded. I understand. If the house has to be sold, we'll do it fairly. What about Mom? She'll get her share. And me? You'll get yours. She looked surprised. You're really willing to do that? Yes. Even after everything? I thought about it. Yes. She began to cry again. But this time, I didn't feel responsible for making the tears stop. I simply sat beside her. Then my phone rang. It was my attorney. I answered. Hello. Ellie, where are you? The lake house. Are you alone? Karen is here. He became quiet. Then he said, I need you both to listen carefully. Karen moved closer. What happened? I asked. The county sent us another record. What record? The original filing. I frowned. What about it? The document your father attached to the deed wasn't just a personal note. I looked at Karen. What was it? It was a recorded restriction. I stood up. A restriction? Yes. He paused. It states that no owner can transfer, refinance, or encumber the property without written consent from the other owners. I felt my chest tighten. So they couldn't have done anything without me. Correct. Then why did they try? That is exactly what we're investigating. Karen looked at me. Then her face went pale. Ellie. What? She pointed toward the window. A black SUV had just pulled into the driveway. Neither of us recognized it. The driver got out. Then another man stepped from the passenger side. He was holding a large folder. My attorney was still speaking through the phone. Ellie, don't sign anything. I won't. Don't give them the original deed. I won't. The man walked toward the porch. He stopped at the front door, then knocked. Karen looked at me. Who is that? I didn't know. But when the man raised the folder, I saw the name printed across the top. The same mortgage company Karen and Rick had been dealing with. And suddenly, I understood. They hadn't come to ask me for my signature. They had come because someone had told them the owner of the property was finally ready to give in. They were about to find out that I wasn't. The knock came again. 3 slow knocks. Karen looked at me. I looked at the folder in my hand. My father's deed. His letters. The papers that had been hidden for years. Then I opened the door. The man standing outside was wearing a dark suit. He held a thick folder against his chest. Ms. Hayes. Yes. My name is Daniel Porter. I represent the lender. I looked at the folder. What do you want? He glanced at Karen, then back at me. We were told the ownership issue had been resolved. It hasn't. His expression changed. I see. He opened his folder. I have documents showing that the owners were prepared to cooperate with the refinance. I shook my head. I never agreed to it. Karen stepped beside me. I told them she would. Daniel looked at her. But you are not the only owner. No, I took a breath. And I never gave permission. He closed the folder. Then the lender cannot move forward. I nodded. Good. He looked uncomfortable. I should tell you something. What? The refinance application was submitted with a statement that all owners had agreed. I already knew that. What happens now? That depends on whether the application is withdrawn or challenged. Karen looked frightened. Can they come after us? Daniel looked at her. If the information was false, there may be consequences. Karen lowered her eyes. I felt sorry for her. But I didn't feel responsible. That was new for me. For most of my life, seeing someone I loved in trouble meant one thing. Fix it. Pay it. Handle it. Make the call. Write the check. Keep the peace. But this time, I did none of those things. I simply stood there. Daniel turned to me. I suggest you speak with your attorney before taking any action. I already have. He nodded. Then you are ahead of this. He left. Karen closed the door. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she whispered, I ruined everything. I looked at her. No, she looked surprised. You made choices. That sounds like the same thing. It isn't. I walked back to the living room. She followed. We sat across from each other. I placed Dad's letter on the table. Karen, I need the whole truth. She nodded. I'll tell you. When did you decide to refinance the house? 3 weeks before the dinner. Who came up with the idea? Rick. And Mom. She knew. I closed my eyes. Did she know they were using my share? Karen hesitated. She knew you would have to sign. That wasn't my question. She looked down. Yes. The answer hurt. My own mother knew. She had known. And she still let me walk into that house carrying a pie. I thought about the way she had looked at me that night. The way she had said, don't make this bigger than it is. It had never been about dinner. It had been about getting me into a room where everyone could pressure me. I asked, who filed the transfer request? Karen looked at me. I don't know. Think. I swear, Ellie. I don't know. I believed her. At least this time I did. Then she said, but I know who prepared the paperwork. Who? Rick's accountant. My stomach tightened. Why? He said it would make the refinance easier. And did he know I hadn't agreed? Karen nodded. He knew. I sat back. The room felt smaller. This was no longer just a family problem. Other people had become involved. Professionals. A lender. An accountant. Documents. False statements. My attorney had been right. It had gone too far. I picked up my phone. I need to call my lawyer. Karen nodded. While I was speaking to him, she sat quietly. I explained what the lender had said. I told him about the accountant. I told him Karen had admitted knowing about the refinance. When I finished, he said, Ellie, I want you to stop trying to solve this emotionally. I looked at Karen. What do you mean? Your family may be hurting. They are. But that doesn't change the documents. I nodded. You need to protect yourself first. I knew he was right. So I did something I had never done before. I stopped thinking about what would make everyone happy. And I started thinking about what was fair. The next day, my attorney prepared a formal notice. It stated that I had never consented to the refinance. I had never agreed to transfer my ownership. And I had never authorized anyone to represent me. The lender received the notice. So did Karen. So did Rick. And so did the accountant. For the first time, everyone had the same information. The truth. There was no room left for confusion. 3 days later, the lender withdrew from the deal. The refinance was dead. But that wasn't the end. Rick called me. You've destroyed us. No, you know what happens now? You have to deal with your debts. We'll lose the house. Maybe. He became silent. Then he said, you don't care about this family. I thought about that for a long moment. I care enough to stop lying to it. He hung up. That evening, Karen came to my house. She didn't bring papers. She didn't bring a lawyer. She brought nothing. She stood at my door with tears in her eyes. I want to apologize. I let her inside. She sat at my kitchen table. The same table where I had first opened Dad's folder. I was jealous of you, she said. I looked at her. Why? Because Dad trusted you. I hadn't expected that. She continued. He always asked you to handle things. He trusted me because I was careful. I know. She looked down. And I hated that. I didn't know what to say. Then she whispered, I called you selfish because I wanted everyone else to think you were selfish. I looked at her. Why? Because if everyone believed you were the problem, nobody would ask what we were doing. I nodded slowly. That was cruel. I know. She looked down. I was scared. So was I. She looked at me. You. I nodded. I was scared that if I finally said no, I'd lose all of you. Karen's eyes filled with tears. Did you? I looked across the water. I don't know. She stepped closer. But you didn't lose me. I looked at her. I can't promise everything will go back to the way it was. I don't want that. She seemed surprised. I continued. I wanted to be better. Karen nodded. Then she said, Dad would have liked that. I smiled. Yes. The house went on the market 2 weeks later. The sale was not dramatic. There were no screaming matches. No courtroom scenes. No revenge. Just paperwork. The house sold for a little more than we expected. After the mortgage and expenses were paid, the remaining money was divided according to ownership. Fairly. Honestly. My share was enough to change my life. But I didn't use it to punish anyone. I paid off the last of my own mortgage. I helped Mom move into a smaller home. And I opened an education account for my nephew. I made sure Karen couldn't touch it. That was a boundary I needed to keep. Karen eventually sold her house and began paying down her debts. Rick found another job. It took time. Their lives did not magically become perfect. Neither did mine. Some family members apologized. Some never did. And I learned something important. Closure doesn't always come with an apology. Sometimes closure comes when you stop waiting for one. Months later, I received a letter from Karen. A real letter. Not a text. Not an email. A letter. I opened it at my kitchen table. The first line said, I finally understand why Dad trusted you. I kept reading. She said she was sorry. She said she had spent years thinking being the louder sister meant being the stronger one. She said she had been wrong. Then she wrote something that made me smile. I thought you were taking something from me, but you were only taking back your right to choose. I folded the letter. Then I placed it beside my father's. A few weeks later, Mom invited me to Sunday dinner. There was no folder on the table. No loan papers. No arguments. No one asking me for money. Just dinner. When I arrived, Karen opened the door. She smiled. Come in. I stepped inside. For a moment, I remembered that night months earlier. The night I had stood in the same kind of doorway holding a pie nobody wanted. The night they had called me selfish. The night I had discovered the deed. I realized something. The deed had never been the real victory. The money wasn't. The house wasn't. Even the truth wasn't. The real victory was learning that love and sacrifice were not the same thing. I could love my family without giving them everything I owned. I could help my mother without becoming responsible for every problem. I could forgive Karen without pretending she had never hurt me. And I could finally say no without feeling like a bad daughter. As we sat around the table that Sunday, Karen passed me a plate. More potatoes? I smiled. Just a little. She laughed. It was a small moment, but it meant more than any apology. Because nobody needed anything from me. They simply wanted me there. My father's old words came back to me. A house is only wood and walls. He was right. The lake house was never what I was fighting for. I was fighting for the right to decide what happened to my own life. And the deed didn't make me powerful. It simply proved something I had forgotten. I had always had a seat at the table. I just needed to stop paying for it. And that was the day I finally understood the difference between being selfish and finally choosing yourself.